For 10 years, the boy never heard his father's voice. Every specialist said the same thing. Impossible to fix. His father spent fortunes, traveled 3 continents, demanded answers from the best neurologists money could buy. They all said no. Then a maid saw what the experts refused to look for, and what she pulled from that child's ear will haunt you. Sanchi was a Korean billionaire. Skyscrapers with his name on them, penthouses in 3 countries, wealth beyond imagination. But his son June was born into silence. 10 years old, never heard a single word. Sanchi tried everything. Seoul National University Hospital, the Mayo Clinic. Specialists in Germany who charged more per consultation than most people earn in a year. They did MRIs, auditory brainstem tests, cochlear evaluations. Every single one delivered the same verdict. The auditory nerves are dead. There's nothing we can do. But Sanchi couldn't accept it because June was the only thing that mattered. His wife never recovered from the complicated birth. So Sanchi kept searching, kept paying, kept praying for a miracle. What he didn't know, the miracle wasn't hiding in a research hospital. It was hiding in the woman he'd just hired to dust his furniture. Amanda Davis was a maid. 34. No medical license anymore. No reputation. Just a woman desperate to keep her sister out of bankruptcy. But she noticed something about June that every 6-figure specialist had ignored. Something moving in his ear. Something alive. And one afternoon while Sanchi was in a board meeting, she made a choice that would either save that boy's life or put her in handcuffs. What happened next? You need to see it with your own eyes. Before we continue, hit subscribe, smash that like button, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from right now. I promise you, this story reached you today for a reason. The Sanchi estate rose like a glass fortress on the edge of Seoul's wealthiest district. From the street, it looked untouchable. Marble pathways, floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting clouds, security gates that opened for no one without an appointment. Inside, the mansion didn't feel like a home. It felt like a museum where someone had forgotten to install the exhibits. Amanda's first day began at 6 a.m. sharp. Mrs. Ryu, the head housekeeper, met her at the service entrance with a clipboard and a look that could freeze blood. You will address Mr. Sanchi as Sir if he speaks to you, which he won't. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not enter the master's office or bedroom. And you will never, under any circumstances, interact with the young master. Amanda nodded, gripping the handle of her cleaning cart. She'd signed 12 different non-disclosure agreements just to get through the front door. One misstep and she'd lose this job. And with it, any hope of saving her sister from the debt collectors. The house was enormous. 30 rooms spread across 3 floors, every surface polished to a mirror shine. White Italian marble stretched in every direction. The furniture looked expensive and completely unused, like props in a staged photograph. There were no family photos on the walls, no toys scattered on the floor, no signs that a child lived here at all. Amanda spent the morning dusting rooms that didn't have dust. She wiped down counters no one had touched. The other staff members moved through the halls like shadows, silent and efficient, avoiding eye contact with each other. No one smiled. No one spoke except to confirm tasks. It was the kind of quiet that made your ears ring. Around noon, she saw him for the first time. June sat alone in the sunroom, a massive glass-enclosed space, overlooking a garden that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel brochure. The boy was small for 10, dressed in clothes that probably cost more than Amanda's monthly rent. His hair was perfectly combed. His shoes were spotless. He sat in a leather chair that swallowed him, staring out at the manicured lawn with the stillness of someone much older. Amanda slowed her cart, watching him through the doorway. He didn't move, didn't fidget, didn't get up to explore. He just sat there, perfectly still, like a painting of a child rather than an actual child. Outside the window, the garden stretched for what looked like acres. There was a fountain, flower beds arranged in geometric patterns, stone pathways winding through perfectly trimmed hedges, but no swing set, no sandbox, no soccer ball. Nothing that suggested a kid was allowed to actually be a kid out there. Keep moving. Amanda jumped. Mrs. Ryu had appeared beside her like smoke. The young master is not your concern. Your concern is that baseboards in the East Wing are due for their weekly cleaning. You were just staring. Mrs. Ryu's voice dropped to a whisper, sharp as a blade. Mr. Sanchi pays you to clean. Not to gawk at his son like he's some kind of zoo animal. The boy has a condition. He doesn't need strangers pitying him. Amanda bit back her response and pushed her cart down the hall. but she couldn't shake the image. That boy, alone in a room full of sunlight, surrounded by windows he couldn't go beyond. She'd worked in enough wealthy homes to recognize the difference between protection and imprisonment. Over the next few days, she noticed the pattern. June never left the house, not once. At 8 a.m., a tutor arrived and spent 3 hours with him in the library, teaching through a tablet and sign language. At noon, a physical therapist came to do exercises that looked more like medical procedures than play. At 3 p.m., a nutritionist delivered a meal on a silver tray, perfectly portioned, probably calculated down to the calorie. At 6 p.m., June returned to the sunroom and sat in that same chair until someone came to take him to bed. There was no playtime, no running, no laughter. The boy moved through his day like he was following a hospital routine, not living a childhood, and his father was a ghost. Amanda saw Sanchi exactly twice in her first week. Both times, he walked past her like she was furniture, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Korean to someone about stock prices and board meetings. He never looked at June, never stopped to ask how the boy was doing. The one time June was in the same hallway as his father, Sanchi simply walked past, disappeared into his office, and shut the door. Mrs. Ryu explained it during a staff meeting, her tone matter-of-fact. Mr. Sanchi is a very busy man. He built an empire. He provides the absolute best care for his son. That's his way of showing love. The young master has access to specialists most people couldn't dream of. He has every accommodation. That is more than enough. But Amanda had been a nurse long enough to know what access to specialists really meant. It meant a parade of professionals who showed up, did their tests, collected their checks, and left. It meant the boy was a patient, not a son. She watched June scratch at his ear one afternoon, his small hand pressing against the side of his head like he was trying to push something out. He winced, his face twisting in discomfort, but he didn't cry. He didn't call for help. He just endured it, the way someone who's learned that no one is coming learns to endure. Amanda looked away and kept dusting. It wasn't her place. She was invisible. That's what they paid her for. But that image stayed with her. A boy in a glass fortress, surrounded by every luxury except the one thing he actually needed. Someone to see him as more than broken. If you think it's disgusting that people treat children like broken objects instead of human beings, hit that subscribe button. Let's show the world we care about the vulnerable. Amanda's interview had lasted 7 minutes. She sat in a sterile office on the ground floor of the Sanchi building, across from a woman in a charcoal suit who never smiled once. The woman didn't ask about Amanda's experience or her skills. She asked about her debts, her criminal record, whether she had family who might talk to the press. Amanda answered each question, feeling like she was being dissected rather than interviewed. "You had a nursing license," the woman said, reading from a file that was thicker than it should have been. "You lost it 3 years ago. Malpractice accusation. Patient injury. The case was dismissed, but the board revoked your credentials anyway." Amanda's throat tightened. "I was cleared of wrongdoing, but not of the appearance of wrongdoing." The woman closed the file. "Mr. Sanchi values discretion above all else. You will not discuss your past. You will not discuss his family. You will not discuss anything you see in that house. If you do, we will pursue legal action that will bury you. Do you understand?" Amanda nodded. She needed this job. Her sister's medical bills were drowning them both, and no hospital in the state would hire a nurse with a revoked license, guilty or not. She'd cleaned houses before. She could do it again. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. "You'll start Monday. Mrs. Ryu will provide your uniform and your instructions. Do not be late." Amanda wasn't late. She arrived at 5:45 a.m., 15 minutes early, and waited by the service entrance until exactly 6 before knocking. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s with silver hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. "Mrs. Ryu." She looked Amanda up and down like she was inspecting a piece of furniture that might have a scratch. "You're the new girl." "Yes, ma'am. Amanda Davis." "I don't care about your name." Mrs. Ryu handed her a black uniform, still in plastic wrap. "You will wear this every day. No jewelry, no perfume, no nail polish. You are here to be invisible, not noticed. Change in the staff bathroom. You have 5 minutes." The uniform fit poorly, tight in some places and loose in others, but Amanda didn't complain. She returned to find Mrs. Ryu waiting with the clipboard, tapping her pen against it like a metronome. "Rules," Mrs. Ryu said, leading her into the house. "You will arrive at 6 a.m. and leave at 6 p.m. You will take one 15-minute break at noon. You will eat in the staff room, never in the main house. You will not use your phone during work hours. You will not speak to Mr. Sanchi unless he addresses you first. which he won't. You will not look him in the eye. You will not ask him questions. If you encounter him in a hallway, you will step aside and lower your gaze until he passes. Is this clear? Yes, ma'am. You will not interact with the young master under any circumstances. He has a medical team and a care schedule. You are not part of that schedule. You are here to clean, not to play nurse. If you see him in distress, you will notify me immediately. You will not touch him. You will not attempt to help him. Am I clear? Amanda hesitated. What if it's an emergency? Mrs. Ryu stopped walking and turned to face her. There will be no emergencies that require your intervention. The young master has a call button in every room. Medical staff are on standby. Your job is to maintain the cleanliness of this household. If you cannot accept that boundary, you can leave now. Amanda thought about the eviction notice on her apartment door. The collection agency calls that came 3 times a day. Her sister, barely able to walk after the accident, working double shifts at a call center just to stay afloat. I understand. Good. One more thing, Mrs. Ryu's voice dropped, almost conspiratorial. You will hear things in this house. You will see things. Mr. Sanchi's private life is not your concern. His business dealings are not your concern. His son's condition is not your concern. You are a cleaner. You are invisible. The moment you forget that, you're gone. And trust me, we've gone through 12 housekeepers in the last 2 years. I have no problem making it 13. The days blurred together after that. Amanda learned the rhythm of the house quickly. She scrubbed floors that were already spotless. She polished silver that no one used. She dusted shelves in rooms where no one ever went. The work was mindless, almost meditative, except for the constant presence of Mrs. Ryu, who appeared without warning to inspect her progress. You missed a spot on the banister. This mirror has a streak. The guest bathroom trash can is 1 inch out of alignment. Amanda fixed each issue without comment. Mrs. Ryu didn't care about cleanliness. She cared about control. Every correction was a reminder that Amanda was replaceable, disposable, one mistake away from being escorted out by security. The other staff members were no help. There were 3 other housekeepers, 2 groundskeepers, a chef, and a driver. None of them spoke to each other beyond what was necessary for work. During her 15-minute breaks, Amanda sat alone in the staff room, eating packed lunches in silence, while the others scrolled through their phones or stared at the wall. It was like working in a library where even breathing felt too loud. She saw Sanchi 4 times in her first 2 weeks. Each time, she followed Mrs. Ryu's instructions perfectly. She stepped aside, lowered her eyes, made herself as small as possible. He never acknowledged her, not a nod, not a glance. She was invisible, exactly as they wanted, but she wasn't blind. She saw how Mrs. Ryu prioritized the marble floors over the boy who walked on them, how the staff would reroute June's physical therapist through a longer hallway just to avoid tracking dirt through a freshly mopped room, how Mrs. Ryu once delayed the boy's lunch by 20 minutes because the chef had left a single pan in the sink, and standards must be maintained. One afternoon, Amanda was cleaning the hallway outside the sunroom when she heard it. A soft thud, like something hitting the floor. She glanced through the doorway and saw June on his hands and knees, reaching for a book that had slipped from his lap. He was struggling, his movements awkward, and for a moment, Amanda's instinct took over. She stepped forward. Stop. Mrs. Ryu materialized beside her, fingers wrapped around Amanda's wrist like a vice. What did I tell you? He dropped his book. He has hands. He'll get it himself. Mrs. Ryu pulled Amanda back into the hallway. I don't care if he's choking on his own tongue. You do not touch that boy. Do you understand me? Amanda pulled her wrist free, her heart pounding. He's a child. He's Mr. Sanchi's child, and you're nobody. Mrs. Ryu leaned in close, her breath smelling like coffee and something bitter. You think you're special because you used to be a nurse? You're not. You're a maid who couldn't cut it in medicine. This is your last stop, so unless you want to be back on the street begging for work, you'll remember your place. Amanda didn't respond. She went back to her cart, hands shaking, and finished her shift in silence. That night, lying in her cramped apartment, she stared at the ceiling and wondered how many people in that house actually saw June as a human being, and how long she could keep pretending she didn't see him either. Amanda's 3rd week started the same as the others. Same uniform, same service entrance, same cold nod from Mrs. Ryu. She was assigned to deep clean the 2nd floor, which included June's bedroom. The boy would be in his morning tutoring session until 11, giving her 2 hours to work undisturbed. June's room was enormous and somehow sadder than the rest of the house. It had everything a child could want and nothing a child actually needed. There was a bed big enough for 3 people, fitted with white silk sheets that looked like they'd never been slept in. Built-in shelves lined one wall, filled with educational toys still in their packaging. A desk held a top-of-the-line computer, the screen dark and spotless. The only sign anyone actually lived here was a single stuffed rabbit on the nightstand, worn and faded, its ear torn and crudely stitched back together. Amanda started with the windows. She was halfway through the second one when the door opened behind her. She turned to see June standing in the doorway, his tutor nowhere in sight. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes that hadn't been there last week. His hair was disheveled, sticking up on one side. He didn't acknowledge her, just walked past her like she was part of the furniture, and sat down on his bed. Amanda knew the rules. She should leave. Mrs. Ryu had been clear. Never be alone with the boy. But her cleaning cart was still in the room, and walking out would mean leaving her supplies behind, which would prompt questions she didn't want to answer. She decided to work quickly and quietly, finishing the windows while June sat motionless on his bed. She was wiping down the bookshelf when she noticed his hand move to his ear. At first it was just a scratch. Normal. The kind of absent-minded gesture anyone makes. But then he did it again. And again. His small fingers pressed against the side of his head, digging in with increasing pressure. His face contorted, a grimace that looked like pain. Amanda paused, watching from the corner of her eye. The boy's hand moved frantically now, clawing at his ear like he was trying to reach something inside. He tilted his head, shaking it violently, his mouth opening in what would have been a cry if he could hear himself make it. She took a step toward him, then stopped. Mrs. Ryu's voice echoed in her head. "You do not touch that boy." But June wasn't just uncomfortable. He was in agony. His whole body had gone rigid, both hands now pressed against his right ear, his breathing rapid and shallow. Amanda watched him for another 5 seconds, her nursing instinct screaming at her, before she made a decision. She crossed the room and knelt in front of him. June's eyes went wide when he saw her. He pulled back, startled, but Amanda raised her hand slowly, showing she meant no harm. She pointed to his ear, then to herself, trying to communicate through gesture what she couldn't say with words he couldn't hear. "Let me look." The boy hesitated, his chest heaving, tears streaming down his face. Then slowly, he tilted his head toward her. Amanda leaned in close, using the morning sunlight from the window to see inside his ear canal. At first, she saw what she expected, the normal curves of the outer ear, maybe some wax buildup. But then she saw something else. Movement. A subtle, rhythmic ripple deep inside the canal, like something breathing. Her stomach dropped. She pulled back slightly, her mind racing through possibilities. An insect? A foreign object? But the movement was too deliberate, too organic. She leaned in again, this time using her phone's flashlight to get a better look. That's when she saw it clearly. Something dark and segmented, tucked deep inside the ear canal. It twitched. A leg, thin and articulated, emerged for just a second before retracting. Then another. Amanda's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't an infection. It wasn't wax. Something was living inside this boy's ear. She sat back on her heels, her hands shaking. June was looking at her with desperate, pleading eyes, his hand still clutching his head. He'd been living with this. For how long? Days? Weeks? Years? And no one had seen it. Not the specialists. Not the therapists. Not the doctors who charged thousands per hour to run their tests and scans. Or maybe they had seen it. Maybe they'd looked and decided it was easier to bill for treatments than to actually solve the problem. Amanda felt a surge of anger so intense it made her dizzy. This child had been trapped in silence for a decade, while the people paid to help him either missed the obvious or ignored it. And meanwhile, Mrs. Ryu was downstairs obsessing over streaks on a mirror. The door burst open. "What are you doing?" Mrs. Ryu stood in the doorway, her face red with fury. She crossed the room in 3 strides and yanked Amanda away from June with enough force to make her stumble. "I told you never to touch him." "There's something in his ear," Amanda said, finding her voice. "Something moving. He needs you to leave him alone." "Mrs. Ryu positioned herself between Amanda and the boy. "The young master has a medical team. They've examined him hundreds of times. If there was something wrong, they would have found it. They didn't look close enough. And you did?" Mrs. Ryu's laugh was sharp and bitter. "You're a disgraced nurse playing maid. You think you know better than the specialists Mr. Sanchi flies in from around the world? Amanda pointed at June, who was still clutching his head, rocking slightly. Look at him. He's in pain. There's something inside his ear canal, and it's moving. I saw it. You saw what you wanted to see. Mrs. Ryu grabbed Amanda's cleaning cart and shoved it toward the door. You're done for today. Go home. I'll discuss your future employment with Mr. Sanchi when he returns. He could have an infection. He could have... Out. Now. Amanda looked past Mrs. Ryu to June, who was watching them both with wide, frightened eyes. She wanted to push past the housekeeper, to grab the boy and take him to an emergency room herself. But she had no authority here, no rights. She was invisible, remember? She left the room, her heart pounding, Mrs. Ryu's glare burning into her back. As she walked down the hallway, she heard it, a soft thud from June's room, then silence. Mrs. Ryu didn't call for help, didn't check on him. The schedule said his nutritionist arrived at noon, and Mrs. Ryu was a woman who lived and died by schedules. Amanda made it to the staff room before she had to sit down, her hands still shaking. She thought about that leg, twitching in the darkness of the boy's ear. She thought about the specialists who'd taken Sanchi's money and given him nothing. She thought about Mrs. Ryu, closing a door on a child suffering because it wasn't part of the routine. Mrs. Ryu ignored a child in pain to keep a schedule. If you can't stand people who put money over morals, like this video right now, let's expose the greed. Amanda didn't go home that day. She told Mrs. Ryu she was leaving, collected her things from the staff room, and walked out the service entrance like an obedient employee. But instead of getting in her car, she circled around to the side garden and waited. She watched the house through the perfectly trimmed hedges, her phone in her hand, trying to decide who to call. The police? And tell them what? That she thought she saw something in a child's ear? They'd laugh her off the phone. Child services? She had no evidence, no medical documentation, nothing but her word against a billionaire and his army of specialists. A hospital? They'd ask for parental consent, which she didn't have. She was trapped. She knew something was wrong, but she had no power to do anything about it. Around 4 p.m., a black Mercedes pulled through the front gates. Amanda recognized it from the staff briefings. Sanchi's car. She watched as the driver opened the rear door, and the billionaire stepped out, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing sharply as he spoke in rapid Korean. He didn't look at his house, didn't look at the gardens his money maintained. He walked straight to the front door, still talking, and disappeared inside. Amanda waited another 10 minutes, then made her decision. She wasn't fired yet. Mrs. Ryu had said they'd discuss her future, which meant she technically still had access to the house. She walked back to the service entrance and knocked. One of the other housekeepers opened the door, looking surprised. I thought you left. I forgot something in my locker, Amanda lied. I'll just be a minute. The woman shrugged and let her in. Amanda moved quickly through the staff corridors, her heart hammering. She didn't go to her locker. She went looking for Mrs. Ryu. She found her in the main kitchen, reviewing the week's grocery orders with the chef. Mrs. Ryu's expression went cold the moment she saw Amanda. You were told to leave. I need to talk to you about June. The chef glanced between them, sensing tension, and quietly excused himself. Mrs. Ryu waited until he was gone before speaking, her voice low and dangerous. You need to leave this property before I have security remove you. There's something in his ear, Amanda said, forcing herself to stay calm. I saw it move. Multiple times. It has legs. It's not wax. It's not an infection. It's something alive. And it's been there long enough to... Stop. Mrs. Ryu held up a hand. I've already spoken to Mr. Sanchi's personal physician. I described your concerns. He reviewed the young master's most recent scan from 3 weeks ago. There is nothing abnormal. What you saw was likely a muscle spasm in the ear canal, which the doctors have documented before. It wasn't a spasm. It had segmented legs. You saw what you wanted to see, Mrs. Ryu interrupted. Because you're desperate to prove you're still a nurse, still relevant, still capable of saving people. But you're not. You lost that right when you injured your patient. Amanda felt the words like a physical blow. That was an accident. I was cleared. You were fired. Mrs. Ryu stepped closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. And now you're trying to diagnose a child you have no authority to touch, based on a 2-second glance. Do you understand how dangerous that is? Do you understand what happens if you're wrong, and Mr. Sanchi wastes time and resources chasing your delusion? And what happens if I'm right and you do nothing? Mrs. Ryu's expression didn't change. Then the medical team will handle it when they discover it during their next examination, which is scheduled for next month. Next month? He's in pain right now. Lower your voice. Mrs. Ryu glanced toward the hallway, checking for witnesses. You are creating a problem where none exists. The young master has chronic ear discomfort. It's documented. It's managed. You are not his doctor. You are not his nurse. You are a housekeeper who is dangerously close to losing her job and any future employment in this city. Amanda's hands clenched into fists. You're protecting a schedule instead of a child. I'm protecting this household from liability. Mrs. Ryu pulled out her phone. And right now, you are a liability. You have two choices. You can leave quietly, and I will tell Mr. Sanchi you had a family emergency and resigned. Your final paycheck will be processed. Or you can continue this crusade, and I will have you escorted out by security, blacklisted from every domestic staffing agency in the state, and possibly charged with trespassing. Which will it be? Amanda wanted to scream. She wanted to push past Mrs. Ryu, find June, and take him to a hospital herself. But she could see the resolve in the housekeeper's eyes. This woman would absolutely follow through on her threats, and Amanda couldn't help anyone from jail or from bankruptcy. I need this job, Amanda said quietly. Then act like it. Mrs. Ryu's voice softened, just slightly. I understand you think you're helping. But Mr. Sanchi has invested millions in his son's care. He has access to resources you can't imagine. If there was something wrong, they would have found it. Trust the system. The system has failed him for 10 years. Mrs. Ryu's face hardened again. Leave. Now. I'll expect you back tomorrow at 6 a.m., and we will never speak of this again. If you bring it up again, to me or anyone else, you're finished. Do you understand? Amanda nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She turned and walked back through the service corridors, her vision blurred with angry tears. She passed the staff room, past her locker, and pushed through the service door into the cool evening air. She sat in her car for 20 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, trying to calm down. Through the windows of the mansion, she could see lights turning on as the sun set. She saw a figure move past one of the second-floor windows. Too small to be an adult. June, probably, heading to his room for another night of silent suffering. Then she saw Sanchi. He appeared in what must have been his office, a room with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the front lawn. He was still on his phone, pacing back and forth, gesturing at someone she couldn't see. His son was one floor above him, possibly in pain, definitely alone, and Sanchi was working. Amanda watched him for 5 minutes. He never looked up, never paused, never left his office to check on June. Whatever conversation he was having was more important than a goodnight to his son. She thought about Mrs. Ryu's words. Trust the system. But what system? A father too busy to be a father? Doctors too expensive to admit they missed something? Staff too terrified to speak up? Amanda started her car and drove home. But she didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed, staring at her phone, looking up images of parasites that could survive in human ear canals. Botflies, certain species of maggots, and centipedes which could nest in dark, warm spaces if they found their way in as larvae. She thought about June's face when he'd let her look, the desperation in his eyes, the way he'd been scratching, clawing, trying to reach something no one else believed was there. Tomorrow she'd go back. She'd follow the rules. She'd be invisible. But she'd also be watching. And the moment she got another chance to look at that ear, she'd take it. Because if she didn't, she wasn't sure anyone else would. Amanda lasted 3 more days before she broke. 3 days of following orders. 3 days of avoiding June's room. 3 days of watching Mrs. Ryu monitor her every move like a warden watching an inmate. She cleaned. She stayed silent. She made herself invisible. But every night, she went home and couldn't sleep. She kept seeing that movement in the boy's ear. The twitch. The segmented leg. On the 4th night, she made a decision that would either save a child or destroy what was left of her life. She waited until midnight. The Sanchi estate went dark around 11. All the staff gone except for the night security guard who patrolled the grounds. Amanda had watched his pattern for 3 nights from her car parked down the street. He did a full circuit every 45 minutes, starting at the front gate and working his way around the perimeter. That gave her a window. She'd kept a copy of her security badge, something she was supposed to return but had conveniently forgotten in her locker. At 12:15 a.m., she slipped through the service entrance, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might give her away. The door beeped softly as the badge registered. She held her breath, waiting for alarms, for footsteps, for Mrs. Ryu to materialize out of the shadows. Nothing. The house was different at night. The silence felt heavier, more oppressive. The marble floors reflected the emergency lighting, giving everything a ghostly blue tint. Amanda moved quickly through the corridors she'd cleaned 100 times, her phone flashlight off, relying on muscle memory and the ambient glow to navigate. She reached the stairs and climbed to the second floor. June's room was at the end of the east hallway. She paused outside his door, listening. No sound from inside. No sound from anywhere. She tried the handle. Unlocked. The door opened with a whisper, and Amanda slipped inside, closing it behind her. The room was dark except for a small nightlight shaped like a moon, casting pale light across June's bed. The boy was asleep, curled on his side, his breathing steady but shallow. His hand rested near his ear, even in sleep, like he was protecting it. Amanda crossed the room, moving slowly to avoid startling him. She knelt beside the bed and pulled out her phone, switching on the flashlight but covering most of it with her fingers to dim the beam. She needed to see the ear canal clearly, but she couldn't risk waking him. Not yet. Not until she knew for sure. She leaned in close, angling the light into his right ear. At first, she saw the same things as before. The curves of the outer ear, some dried blood she hadn't noticed the first time, inflammation around the canal entrance. But then, deeper in, she saw the movement. Slow, rhythmic, like breathing. She adjusted the angle of the light, her hand trembling, and then she saw them. Pincers. 2 curved, segmented mandibles, dark brown and glistening, emerging from deeper in the canal. They opened and closed slowly, mechanically, like something testing the air. Behind them, she could make out the suggestion of a body, coiled and segmented, taking up the entire width of the canal. Amanda's stomach turned. It wasn't just living in there, it had made a home. The inflammation, the blockage, the decade of deafness, it was all because this thing had been feeding and growing inside the boy's ear, probably since he was an infant. She sat back on her heels, her mind racing. How had it gotten there? A trip to a beach? A camping accident? Somewhere tropical where his parents had taken him before his mother died? It didn't matter now. What mattered was getting it out. But she couldn't. Not here. Not alone. This required proper medical equipment, anesthesia, possibly surgery if the creature had embedded itself into the tissue. She needed to document it, take photos, show someone who had the authority to act. She raised her phone to take a picture. The flash went off. Amanda had forgotten to turn it off. The bright light filled the room for a split second, and June's eyes snapped open. He saw her leaning over him, saw the phone, saw the strange woman who'd been told to stay away from him kneeling by his bed in the middle of the night. He opened his mouth in a silent scream. Amanda dropped the phone, raising her hands. No, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm trying to help. But he couldn't hear her. He scrambled backward on the bed, his eyes wide with terror, his hand reaching for something on the nightstand. A button, the panic button, Mrs. Ryu had mentioned during orientation. Amanda lunged forward and caught his wrist before he could press it. Please, listen to me. Look at me. June thrashed, trying to pull away, his free hand clawing at her arm. Amanda held on, not to hurt him, but to keep him from triggering an alarm that would bring security. Mrs. Ryu, possibly Sanchi himself. She tried to make eye contact, tried to convey through gesture that she wasn't a threat, but then June's face contorted in pain. His thrashing stopped. Both hands flew to his ear, pressing against it, his mouth open in a scream he couldn't hear. The creature must have moved, disturbed by the light or the boy's sudden movement. Amanda made a split-second decision. She grabbed her phone from where it had fallen and pulled up the photo she'd just taken. The flash had captured it perfectly. The pincers, the segmented body, the horror living inside the boy's ear. She shoved the phone in front of June's face, forcing him to look. His eyes went wide. He stared at the image, then touched his own ear, then looked back at the photo. Understanding dawned on his face, followed by something worse than fear. Betrayal. How long had he been told nothing was wrong? How long had he lived with this pain, dismissed as chronic discomfort or phantom sensations? Amanda pulled the phone back and typed quickly. I'm a nurse. I can help. But we need to get it out now. She showed him the message. June read it, his chest heaving, tears streaming down his face. He looked at her for a long moment, searching her face for something. Truth, maybe. Or hope. Then, slowly, he nodded. Amanda felt a wave of relief so intense it made her dizzy. She typed another message. Lie still. This will hurt, but I'll be fast. She didn't have proper tools. She had her phone, flashlight, and a pair of tweezers she'd stolen from the medical supply closet 3 days ago, hidden in her jacket pocket. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was all she had, and if she didn't act now, tonight, she might never get another chance. This creature was feeding on him while everyone ignored it. If you believe silence is just as bad as violence, comment, I stand for truth below. Don't let evil hide in the dark. Amanda stared at the tweezers in her hand, then at the boy lying on the bed. Every instinct she'd developed over years of nursing training screamed at her to stop. You don't perform procedures without consent, without proper equipment, without backup, without anesthesia. But she also knew what happened when parasites nested this close to the brain. Infection, tissue damage. If that centipede burrowed any deeper, it could pierce the eardrum completely, reach the middle ear, potentially the inner ear. From there, it was a short path to the meninges, the protective membranes around the brain. She was reaching for June's face when his whole body went rigid. The boy's eyes rolled back, his hands dropped from his ear. For a horrible second, Amanda thought he was having a seizure, but then she recognized the signs. Vertigo. Severe vertigo. The creature must have shifted position, pressing against the semicircular canals that controlled balance. June's world was spinning, his brain receiving signals that he was falling even though he was lying still. He tried to sit up and immediately vomited over the side of the bed. Amanda caught him before he could roll off, easing him back onto the pillows. His skin had gone pale and clammy, his breathing rapid and shallow. She pressed 2 fingers to his neck, checking his pulse. Elevated but steady. Not a stroke. Not yet. But this was bad. This was very bad. She ran to the bathroom and grabbed a towel, wetting it with cold water. When she returned, June was conscious but unresponsive, staring at the ceiling with unfocused eyes. She pressed the towel to his forehead, trying to bring down what she suspected was a fever. His skin was burning up. The creature was moving, actively burrowing. And June's body was finally reacting to the foreign invader the way it should have years ago, if anyone had bothered to look. Amanda pulled out her phone and typed a message with shaking hands. I'm getting help. Stay still. She didn't wait to see if he understood. She ran to the door, threw it open, and screamed down the hallway. Help! Someone help! The house remained silent for what felt like an eternity. Then she heard footsteps. Fast ones. The night security guard appeared at the end of the hallway, hand on his radio. What's happening? You're not supposed to be here. The boy is sick. He needs a doctor. Now. The guard looked past her into the room, saw June on the bed, and his training kicked in. He spoke rapid Korean into his radio, then pushed past Amanda to check on June. Amanda followed, watching as the guard knelt beside the bed, trying to rouse the boy. More footsteps. Mrs. Ryu appeared in the doorway, wearing a silk robe, her hair down for the first time since Amanda had met her. She looked younger, more vulnerable, but her eyes went cold the moment she saw Amanda. What did you do? I didn't do anything. He collapsed. He needs medical attention. Mrs. Ryu pushed her aside and moved to the bed, her hands hovering over June like she was afraid to touch him. Call Dr. Huang. Tell him it's an emergency. The guard was already dialing. Amanda heard him speaking in Korean, his tone urgent. He listened for a moment, his expression darkening, then turned to Mrs. Ryu. He's in Busan. He can't get here until morning. He suggests we take him to the emergency room. No hospitals. Mrs. Ryu's voice was sharp. Mr. Sanchi was very clear. No hospitals unless absolutely necessary. The press, the publicity call, the backup physician, Dr. Choi. The guard dialed again. This time the conversation was shorter. He's not answering. Then keep trying. Amanda stepped forward. He needs help now. Not in an hour. Not when someone finally picks up their phone. Now. Mrs. Ryu turned on her. You broke into this house in the middle of the night. You have no right to. There's a parasite in his ear. Amanda interrupted, her voice loud enough to echo in the hallway. I saw it. I photographed it. It's burrowing deeper, and if we don't remove it immediately, it could reach his brain. The security guard's eyes widened. Mrs. Ryu's face went pale. That's impossible. He's been examined by doctors who were paid to run tests, not to actually look. Amanda pulled out her phone and shoved the photo in Mrs. Ryu's face. Look at it. Tell me I'm crazy now. Mrs. Ryu stared at the image. Her hand came up to her mouth. Oh my God. It's been there for years, Amanda continued, her voice steadier now. Probably since he was a baby. It's why he's deaf. It's been blocking the canal, secreting something that numbed the area so he couldn't feel it. But now it's moving, and his body is shutting down because it can't handle the infection anymore. The guard leaned over to look at the photo. He said something in Korean, his voice tight with disgust. Mrs. Ryu straightened, her composure returning. We'll take him to the hospital. I'll call Mr. Sanchi and... There's no time. Amanda moved to the bed, looking down at June. His eyes were closed now, his breathing shallow. By the time we get him to a hospital, get him checked in, wait for a specialist, that thing could be in his inner ear, or worse. Then what do you suggest? Mrs. Ryu's voice was ice. Amanda met her gaze. I remove it. Here. Now. The room went silent. The guard stopped trying to call the backup doctor. Mrs. Ryu stared at her like she'd just suggested setting the house on fire. You're not a doctor, Mrs. Ryu said slowly. You're not even a nurse anymore. You want me to let you perform surgery on Mr. Sanchi's son with a pair of tweezers? It's not surgery. It's an extraction. And yes, I only have tweezers, but I also have 10 years of emergency room experience and steady hands, which is more than anyone else in this house has right now. If you're wrong if you hurt him, Mr. Sanchi will destroy you. He'll destroy your family. He'll make sure you never work again, anywhere. If I'm right and do nothing, the boy dies. Amanda knelt beside the bed. I can live with being destroyed. I can't live with letting a child die because I was too scared to help. Mrs. Ryu looked at June, then at the photo on Amanda's phone, then back at Amanda. She was calculating, weighing risks, protecting her position. Amanda could see it all playing out behind her eyes. Fine, Mrs. Ryu said finally, but I'm calling Mr. Sanchi. And if this goes wrong, I will personally make sure you pay for it. Amanda didn't respond. She was already moving, setting up her phone's flashlight on the nightstand, angling it toward June's ear. She tested the tweezers, making sure the tips aligned properly. They were meant for splinters, not parasites, but they'd have to do. The guard spoke quietly to Mrs. Ryu in Korean. She snapped back at him, her tone leaving no room for argument. He pulled out his phone and started recording. For evidence, Mrs. Ryu said coldly, in case we need it. Amanda nodded. She understood. If this worked, Mrs. Ryu would take credit. If it failed, Amanda would take the blame. That was fine. She wasn't doing this for recognition. She leaned over June, her hand steady despite her racing heart. I'm sorry, she whispered, even though he couldn't hear her. But I promise, this ends tonight. Amanda positioned herself beside the bed, her body angled so the phone's flashlight beam hit June's ear directly. The boy was barely conscious, his head lolling to the side, but his hand still twitched toward his ear every few seconds like a reflex he couldn't control. She placed her left hand gently on the side of his face, holding his head steady. With her right hand, she brought the tweezers up to the light, checking one more time that the tips were clean and properly aligned. They weren't surgical grade. They weren't even medical grade, but they were all she had. Mrs. Ryu stood in the corner, arms crossed, her phone pressed to her ear. Amanda could hear her speaking quietly in Korean, presumably to Sanchi, explaining the situation. The security guard remained by the door, his phone camera pointed at the bed, capturing everything. Amanda blocked them all out. Right now, there was only her, the boy, and the creature. She leaned in close, using the flashlight to peer into the ear canal. The centipede had moved since she'd last looked. Its pincers were no longer visible, which meant it had retracted deeper, sensing danger or simply continuing its slow burrow toward places that would kill the boy if it reached them. She needed to draw it out. Amanda pulled back and looked around the room. Her eyes landed on June's nightstand, where a glass of water sat untouched. She grabbed it and poured a tiny amount onto her finger, then let a single drop fall into the boy's ear canal. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the creature responded to the moisture. Amanda saw the ripple of movement as it shifted position, and then, slowly, the pincers emerged again, clicking together in what might have been irritation. This was her chance. She brought the tweezers down slowly, her hand remarkably steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. The opening was narrow, maybe 4 millimeters across, and the centipede was coiled behind layers of inflamed tissue and its own secretions. One wrong move and she could puncture the eardrum or push the creature deeper. The tips of the tweezers touched the pincers. The centipede recoiled instantly, pulling back, but Amanda was faster. She caught one of the pincers between the tweezer's grip and held firm. The creature resisted, its body writhing, trying to pull free. Amanda could feel the tension through the metal. the pure biological drive to survive transmitting itself through the tool into her hand. She pulled. Slowly, steadily. The resistance was enormous. The centipede had been in there for years, its body adapted to the confined space, possibly anchored to the tissue with tiny hooks or barbs. Amanda increased the pressure. Her jaw clenched, sweat beading on her forehead. Something gave. The creature lurched forward, emerging another millimeter. Amanda could see more of its body now, segmented and glossy, dark brown with lighter stripes along each section. It was longer than she'd thought. Much longer. June's eyes flew open. He couldn't hear, couldn't scream, but his mouth opened wide and his whole body went rigid. The pain must have been excruciating. Amanda's left hand pressed down on his shoulder, holding him in place. "I know," she said, even though he couldn't hear her. "I know it hurts, just a little more." Mrs. Ryu took a step forward, her phone call forgotten. "Is it working?" "It's fighting back," Amanda said through gritted teeth. She pulled again, harder this time, and the centipede came loose another few millimeters. She could see its legs now, dozens of them, each one tipped with a tiny claw, scrabbling for purchase against the walls of the ear canal. The creature twisted violently, and Amanda nearly lost her grip. She readjusted the tweezers, catching it closer to its body segments, and pulled with everything she had. June thrashed. His hand came up, trying to knock Amanda away, trying to stop the agony that was worse than anything he'd experienced in 10 years of silent suffering. The security guard moved forward to help, but Amanda shook her head sharply. "Don't touch him. I need him still." Mrs. Ryu moved to the other side of the bed and grabbed June's shoulders, pinning him down. Her face was pale, her hands shaking, but she held firm. The boy bucked beneath them, his silent screams more terrible than any sound. Amanda pulled. The centipede came free in one long, horrible moment. 6 inches of writhing, segmented nightmare, its legs kicking at the air, its pincers snapping at nothing. Amanda held it up to the light, the tweezers trembling in her hand, and for a second, everyone in the room just stared. It was still alive, still fighting. Drops of clear fluid fell from its body, the same secretion that had numbed June's ear canal and kept him from feeling its presence for a decade. Mrs. Ryu made a sound between a gasp and a retch. The security guard's phone camera captured it all, the creature twisting in the air like something from a horror film. Amanda turned to look for something to put it in, and that's when she heard the voice behind her. "What the hell is going on here?" She froze. Sanchi stood in the doorway, still wearing his business suit from whatever late meeting he'd been in. His eyes moved from Amanda holding the tweezers, to his son pinned on the bed with Mrs. Ryu's hands on his shoulders, to the security guard filming everything, and finally to the creature still writhing in Amanda's grip. His face went from confusion to horror to rage in the space of a single breath. "Get away from my son." The doctors were too lazy to look, but Amanda is risking jail to help. If you support heroes who do the right thing even when it's scary, smash that subscribe button. Amanda didn't move. She couldn't. She was still holding the centipede, still processing what she'd just done, still watching June on the bed. The boy's hand had moved to his ear, touching it gently, and his eyes were wide with an expression Amanda couldn't read. Not pain anymore, something else. Sanchi crossed the room in 3 strides. He grabbed Amanda's wrist, the one holding the tweezers, and yanked her away from the bed. The centipede fell from her grip, hitting the floor and immediately scuttling toward the darkness under the bed. The security guard stomped on it. Once, twice. The 3rd time, it stopped moving. "I asked you a question," Sanchi said, his grip on Amanda's wrist painful. "What were you doing to my son?" "She saved him," Mrs. Ryu said quietly. Sanchi turned to look at her, his eyes blazing. "She broke into my house in the middle of the night and attacked him with a weapon." "It's not a weapon, it's tweezers," Amanda said, finding her voice. "And I wasn't attacking him, I was removing that." She pointed to the floor where the centipede's crushed body lay. Sanchi looked down. His grip on Amanda's wrist loosened slightly. "What is that?" "A parasitic centipede," Amanda said. "It's been living in your son's ear canal for probably his entire life. It's the reason he's deaf. It's been blocking the canal and secreting a numbing agent. Your specialists missed it because they were running expensive tests instead of actually looking." Sanchi stared at the crushed creature, then at his son. June was sitting up now, both hands pressed to his ear, his chest heaving. There was blood trickling from the canal, mixing with the clear secretion, but his eyes were alert, focused. "That's impossible," Sanchi said. "We've had the best doctors you could buy. Amanda interrupted, which apparently wasn't good enough. Sanchi's face flushed with anger. He pulled out his phone with his free hand and barked orders in Korean. Amanda caught enough words to understand. Police, hospital, immediate. Mrs. Ryu stepped forward. Mr. Sanchi, before you call anyone, you should know that I authorized this. I saw the photo. I made the decision to let her proceed, because Dr. Huang wasn't available and your son was deteriorating. If you're going to blame someone, blame me. Sanchi looked at his head housekeeper like he'd never seen her before. You let a fired nurse perform surgery on my son? I let a woman with medical training remove a parasite that was killing him, Mrs. Ryu said, her voice steady. And I'd make the same choice again. The room fell silent except for June's ragged breathing. Amanda watched the boy touch his ear again, then pull his fingers away to look at the blood. He seemed confused, disoriented, but not in pain anymore. The agony that had twisted his face was gone. And then, very quietly, June spoke. Appa? Everyone froze. The word was barely a whisper, rough and uncertain, like someone using vocal cords that had never been properly exercised. But it was a word, a Korean word. Father. Sanchi's phone slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. June's voice cut through the room like a knife through silk. One word, barely audible, but it shattered 10 years of silence in an instant. Sanchi stood frozen, staring at his son. His mouth opened but no sound came out. The color had drained from his face, leaving him looking suddenly older, more vulnerable. His hand that had been gripping Amanda's wrist went slack, and she pulled free, stepping back toward the wall. Appa? June said again, louder this time. And then his face crumpled. His hands flew to his ears, covering them, and he began to rock back and forth. Not in pain this time, but in overwhelming sensory shock. He could hear. For the first time in his life he could hear. And it was too much. The hum of the air conditioning, the rustle of fabric as Mrs. Ryu shifted her weight, the sound of his own breathing, amplified in his skull. The world had suddenly exploded into noise, and he didn't know how to process it. June screamed. It was a raw, primal sound, the scream of someone experiencing something their brain had no framework to understand. He pressed his hands harder against his ears, trying to block it out, but that only made the internal sounds louder. His own heartbeat, the rush of blood through his vessels. Everything was noise. Sanchi moved toward the bed, his businessman composure crumbling. June, it's okay, it's... But June screamed again, louder, thrashing on the bed. He couldn't understand that the sounds were normal. He couldn't understand that this was how everyone else experienced the world. To him, it was an assault. Overwhelming and terrifying and impossible to escape. And in that moment, Sanchi's shock transformed into rage. He spun around, his eyes locking onto Amanda. She saw the calculation happen in real time, his son screaming in agony, blood running from his ear, a stranger standing over him with a medical instrument. Sanchi didn't see the dead centipede on the floor. He didn't process Mrs. Ryu's explanation or the security footage still recording. He saw only what his fear told him to see. Someone was hurting his son. Sanchi lunged. He crossed the distance between them in 2 steps and slammed Amanda against the wall, his forearm pressed across her throat. The air left her lungs in a rush. The tweezers clattered from her hand. What did you do to him? Sanchi's voice was barely human, thick with panic and fury. What did you do? Amanda tried to speak but couldn't get air past his arm. She clawed at his forearm, her vision starting to blur at the edges. Over his shoulder, she could see Mrs. Ryu moving toward them, and the security guard reaching for his radio. Mr. Sanchi, stop! Mrs. Ryu grabbed his shoulder, trying to pull him back. She helped him. She made him scream. Sanchi didn't take his eyes off Amanda. She's bleeding him. He can hear, Mrs. Ryu shouted, loud enough to cut through the chaos. He's screaming because he can hear for the first time in his life and he doesn't understand it. Let her go. Sanchi's arm loosened just enough for Amanda to drag in a gasping breath. She tried to form words, to explain, but her throat felt crushed. All she could do was point weakly toward the floor where the centipede lay. The security guard understood. He moved quickly, kneeling down and holding up his phone camera to show Sanchi the crushed remains. Sir, look. Sanchi finally turned his head. He saw the creature in the guard's frame, 6 inches of segmented nightmare, its legs still curled in death. His arm dropped from Amanda's throat completely. She collapsed against the wall, coughing, her hand at her neck. What is that? Sanchi whispered. It was inside June's ear, Mrs. Ryu said, her voice shaking. For years. Maybe his whole life. It was blocking his hearing. She pulled it out. Sanchi looked from the dead centipede to his son, who was still on the bed, rocking and crying, his hands pressed to his ears. Then he looked at Amanda, and she saw the exact moment understanding replaced rage. The horror, the realization, the crushing weight of what he'd almost done. "He can hear?" Sanchi's voice cracked. "Yes," Amanda rasped, still trying to catch her breath. The canal was completely blocked. The creature was secreting something that numbed the area and masked the symptoms. Your doctors never looked deep enough. They assumed the nerves were dead because that's what the scans suggested. But it was just pressure, blockage. Once I removed it, you broke into my house. Sanchi's voice was flat now, all emotion drained out. You went into my son's room in the middle of the night. You performed an unauthorized medical procedure. She saved his life, Mrs. Ryu interrupted. While your expensive doctors were sleeping in their expensive beds, she was here, pulling a parasite out of your son's head with a pair of tweezers. She risked everything, her freedom, her future, and she did it because no one else would. Sanchi looked at the housekeeper for a long moment, then back at Amanda. She couldn't read his expression. Was it gratitude, anger, shame? Maybe all three. "Call an ambulance," he said finally. "He needs to be examined, properly. I want scans, blood work, everything." The security guard nodded and stepped into the hallway to make the call. Sanchi moved to the bed, sitting beside his son. June was still covering his ears, still rocking, but his screams had subsided into quiet sobs. Sanchi reached out hesitantly, like he was afraid to touch the boy, then placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. June flinched at the contact but didn't pull away. "I'm sorry," Sanchi said quietly. Not to June specifically, to the room, to the universe. "I'm so sorry." Amanda watched from her position against the wall, still rubbing her throat. She saw the moment a father realized he'd failed his son, that all the money, all the specialists, all the protective measures had been worthless. Worse than worthless. They'd been distractions from the simple truth that no one had bothered to really look. Mrs. Ryu approached Amanda, her expression softer than it had been since they'd met. "Are you all right?" Amanda nodded, though her throat felt like it had been crushed. "I'm fine." "You're not." Mrs. Ryu pulled out her phone. "I'm calling our lawyer." Mr. Sanchi was acting in his son's defense. What just happened could be considered. "Don't," Amanda said. "He was protecting his child. I would have done the same thing if I'd walked in and seen what he saw." Mrs. Ryu studied her face. "You're more forgiving than I would be. I'm just tired." The paramedics arrived 20 minutes later, summoned by both the security guard and, apparently, several neighbors who'd heard the screaming. They examined June carefully, documenting the extraction site, the blood, the inflammation. They collected the dead centipede in a specimen jar, handling it with gloved hands and expressions of disgust. One of the paramedics, a woman in her 40s, approached Amanda. "You removed this?" "Yes." "With tweezers?" "Yes." The paramedic shook her head slowly. "That was incredibly stupid and incredibly brave. You know that, right?" Amanda managed a weak smile. "I'm learning." Sanchi judged her without knowing the full story. If you hate it when people jump to conclusions without the facts, comment "listen before you judge" right now. They took June to the hospital despite his protests. The boy was terrified, overwhelmed by the ambulance sirens, the voices of strangers, the mechanical beeping of medical equipment. Everything was sound now, and he had no filter, no way to distinguish important noises from background noise. Sanchi rode with him, holding his hand, speaking to him in soft Korean that probably sounded like thunder to the boy's newly opened ears. Amanda was left in the bedroom with Mrs. Ryu and the security guard, waiting for the police that Sanchi had called before understanding what had really happened. "Missus." Ryu had tried to stop him from following through, but Sanchi insisted. She broke in. "There are procedures, legal procedures." So Amanda sat on the edge of June's bed and waited to be arrested for saving a child's life. The police arrived 45 minutes after the ambulance left. 2 officers, one older with gray at his temples, one younger who kept glancing around the mansion like he'd never seen wealth this concentrated in one place. Amanda was sitting in the kitchen, Mrs. Ryu beside her with a printed copy of the security footage on her tablet, ready to show them everything. The older officer listened to Mrs. Ryu's explanation, watched the footage, examined the specimen jar with the dead centipede that the paramedics had left behind for evidence. He asked Amanda questions in accented English. "How did you enter the property?" Why did you think it was appropriate to perform a medical procedure without consent? Do you understand that breaking and entering is a crime regardless of your intentions? Amanda answered each question honestly. Yes, she'd used her old security badge. Yes, she knew it was illegal. Yes, she understood the consequences. No, she didn't regret it. The younger officer pulled out his handcuffs. Mrs. Ryu stood up. Is that really necessary? She's not a flight risk. She came here to help a child. She broke into a private residence and performed an unauthorized medical procedure, the older officer said, not unkindly. Mr. Sanchi specifically requested she be taken into custody. We don't have discretion here. Amanda held out her wrists. The metal was cold against her skin, heavier than she'd expected. The click of the cuffs closing felt final, like a door slamming shut on whatever was left of her life. They led her through the service entrance, the same door she'd entered through hours ago as an intruder. The morning sun was rising now, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. The estate looked beautiful in the dawn light, pristine and untouchable. Amanda wondered if she'd ever see it again. The police station was 40 minutes away, a modern building that smelled like burnt coffee and industrial cleaner. They processed her quickly. Fingerprints, mugshot, personal effects sealed in a plastic bag. The charges were read aloud by a clerk who sounded bored. Criminal trespass, performing medical procedures without a license, potentially reckless endangerment pending the hospital's report on June's condition. She was put in a holding cell with 3 other women, none of whom looked at her. Amanda sat on the metal bench and stared at the cinder block wall, trying not to think about what came next. Her sister would have to be told. The debt collectors would have ammunition now. Any hope of finding legitimate work was gone, but June could hear. She held on to that. Whatever happened to her, that boy could hear his father's voice. He could hear music. He could hear laughter. That had to count for something. Hours passed. Amanda dozed fitfully, waking each time the cell door opened to release or admit someone. Around noon, a guard appeared and called her name. Amanda Davis. You have a visitor. She was led to a small room with a table and 2 chairs. The guard gestured for her to sit, then left, locking the door behind him. Amanda waited, her hands folded on the table, trying to prepare herself for whoever had come. Her sister, probably. Or maybe a public defender. The door opened. Sanchi walked in. He looked different than he had in the mansion. His suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened. His hair was disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it for hours. The polish was gone, the billionaire armor stripped away. He looked like what he was, a father who hadn't slept. Amanda tensed, remembering the feeling of his forearm across her throat. But Sanchi didn't look angry now. He looked broken. He sat down across from her, silent for a long moment. Then he said, in carefully pronounced English, "They want to keep him overnight for observation. His ear canal is inflamed, but there's no permanent damage. No infection. The creature didn't penetrate the eardrum. They said if it had been there another month, maybe another week." He trailed off. Amanda nodded but didn't speak. "He can hear," Sanchi continued, his voice thick. "They tested him. They played sounds at different frequencies. He responded to all of them. His hearing is perfect. It was always perfect. It was just blocked." He said the last word like it was obscene. "That's good," Amanda said quietly. "I'm glad." Sanchi leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. "I spent 10 years taking him to specialists. I flew him around the world. I paid millions for treatments, therapies, surgeries that went nowhere. And the whole time, the answer was right there. Something you saw in 30 seconds that they missed in a decade. They weren't looking for it," Amanda said. "They were looking at scans and nerve tests. They trusted the technology more than their eyes, and I trusted them." Sanchi's voice cracked. "I trusted them because they were expensive, because they had degrees from the best schools, because I thought money could buy competence." He laughed bitterly. "My son suffered for 10 years because I was too arrogant to question the experts." Amanda didn't know what to say to that. Sanchi reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He slid it across the table. "I've instructed the prosecutor to drop all charges. Criminal trespass, unauthorized medical procedure, everything. This is a signed statement saying you had my permission to be on the property and my consent to treat my son. It's backdated. Legally questionable, but my lawyers assure me it will hold." Amanda stared at the paper. "Why?" "Because you saved my son's life, and I tried to strangle you for it." Sanchi's eyes were red-rimmed, Because you did what I should have done. You looked at him like he was a person, not a problem to be solved with money. You saw him. I was just... You risked everything, Sanchi interrupted. Your freedom, your future. You broke into the home of one of the wealthiest men in Korea to help a child you barely knew. Do you understand how rare that is? How... He paused, searching for words. How humbling. Amanda looked down at her cuffed wrists. I did what anyone would do. No, you did what no one else would do. Not the doctors, not my staff, not me. Sanchi stood up and called for the guard. When the door opened, he spoke in rapid Korean. The guard hesitated, then pulled out his keys and unlocked Amanda's handcuffs. She rubbed her wrists, the skin red and indented. Sanchi sat back down. I came here to ask for your help. June is terrified. He doesn't understand what's happening to him. The sounds are overwhelming. He needs someone who understands what he's going through, someone with medical training who can help him adjust. The hospital staff is competent, but they're strangers. He struggled for the word. You're the person who freed him. He trusts you. I don't have a nursing license anymore, Amanda said. I don't care about your license. I care that you saw what everyone else missed. I'm offering you a position, not as a housekeeper, as June's private medical companion. You'll help him adapt to hearing. You'll oversee his recovery. You'll make sure no one ever overlooks him again. Sanchi pulled out another paper, this one with numbers on it. This is the salary. It's negotiable. Amanda looked at the number. It was more than she'd made in 5 years as a nurse. I can't just erase what I did, she said quietly. I broke the law. I violated your trust. You saved my son, Sanchi said firmly. Everything else is just details I can pay lawyers to fix. What I can't fix is the 10 years I stole from him because I was too busy building empires to be a father. But maybe, with your help, I can give him a future where he doesn't have to be silent anymore. Amanda looked at him for a long moment. She saw genuine remorse in his eyes, real humility. This wasn't a billionaire making a business deal. This was a father begging for redemption. Okay, she said. I'll help him. Sanchi's shoulders sagged with relief. He stood and offered his hand. Amanda shook it. Thank you, he said. For seeing him when I couldn't. For being brave when I was blind. Thank you. Amanda left the police station an hour later. All charges dropped, all records expunged. Mrs. Ryu was waiting in the parking lot with her car, a small smile on her usually stern face. He's waiting for you at the hospital, Mrs., Ryu said as Amanda got in. He keeps trying to say your name, but he can't quite get the pronunciation right. It's the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. They drove through the city as the sun set, painting the buildings in gold. Amanda looked out the window and thought about the boy she'd met 3 weeks ago, sitting alone in his glass fortress. And she thought about the boy she'd see tonight, hearing his father's voice for the first time, learning that the world was full of sounds worth listening to. Sometimes the monsters aren't the creatures hiding in the dark. Sometimes they're the silence we accept, the suffering we ignore, the questions we're too afraid to ask. And sometimes, all it takes to slay those monsters is one person willing to look closer. Amanda saved him when no one else would. If you believe good deeds should always be rewarded, hit the like button. Let's get this story to 10,000 likes for Amanda.